Hello, welcome to another Azure Centric Podcast on our weekly update show with our good friend Andrew Lowes. My name is Marcos Nogueira and I'm your host for this episode. It's a very nice introduction and a very polite one, but it's our show and it's our week. And as you guys can see it's going to be a great show. And main reason is we are recording on daylight time.
Uh-oh.
Uh oh.
We have a reputation for daylight recordings, don't we? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And it's a nice reputation. We got a lot of feedback saying, please record all the episodes or all the show during the light time, because it's way more funner. Let's call it this way. But this week there is a topic regarding this week, kind of a combined topic. Let's call it this way. But after the last podcast, and if you listen the last podcast, thank you for doing that because it did break our record. Although it
That
was
was a
a very
marathon.
special week. It was the Ignite week, and it was the week that all the announcements come. We did cover on a different perspective than the book of news. We didn't record yet the book of news. We were doing to our very busy agendas and all of the good things that Ignite come, or the Ignite bring to us. In this case, let me say on that way, it was a different way. But without further ado, I think we want to thank you, in this case, for listening to the podcast. If you like what we are doing over here, giving a thumbs up, it will help us a lot. Giving a thumbs down if you don't like it. But above all, keep that momentum going and share with your friends if you really like what you listen over here and seeing over here on our show. The idea over here is to pass the knowledge, right, Andrew?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's our one of our bigger driving forces. We like to just get together and share and kind of go through the Azure updates and the news and kind of share how it relates to the real world based on our experiences and knowledge. So it's kind of our own little spin on Azure news for the week. And it was an interesting week this week. Yes,
It was.
there's a bit of a theme. So I don't want to spoil it. So
No spoiler
it's
alerts.
interesting.
No
Last
spoiler
week,
alerts.
I don't know what the theme was after Ignite. It was like the holy cow theme.
It
There
was.
was
It was.
just everything.
It was what we usually call the Armageddon
It was,
of
yeah,
updates.
exactly. But how many updates was there last? It was like 90 or
92
something.
or something,
Yeah,
and
yeah. It was just crazy. That was the biggest number I've ever seen.
yeah, and
Which is good though, because it
which is
means there's a
awesome.
lot of products coming out, a lot of updates happening, and it's not like they were saving up for a long time before Ignite either, so they didn't hold back a whole lot.
Yeah.
Uh, so
Yeah, absolutely. Indeed. So they are keep going. It's going to be a short, in this case, not as long as the other one. So I don't know if
short by
that's
our
good news
standards.
for you or not. If you like us, this duo that we have, kind of a sync duo, like a country one or something like that. In Brazil, we call the sertanejo. In this case, the sertanejo duo. It's kind of more like a country over here in North America. But yeah, without further ado, let's start our show. The first update that we got is Azure Routing Preference. It's now in GA. We did have a team on last episode about Azure Route Server. Okay, that
Yeah,
was in preview. This is a little bit different. Okay,
it is different.
although the naming is very similar, but it's not the same thing. That's the first thing that I want to clarify. If you are following us, and we did start the curious or not the last show or the last episode with Azure Route Server, I
Mhm.
think. But in this case, is the routing Azure Routing Preference. So what do you think about these update?
I actually like this one. So this one builds on some of the news that we've talked about maybe in like a few months ago, I think, where we saw some very powerful articles from Mark Russinovich, I believe. If I'm wrong, please correct me by all
Yes,
means.
he was our
But
good friend, the CTO of Azure.
exactly, yeah, the big Kahuna, right? I think they said, but he wrote some really powerful articles. I think it was either two or three about using Azure Backbone, using Microsoft's fiber network to route traffic worldwide, and giving customers choices about if they use like a DMARC, like an endpoint to route out of the network. So, as an example, let's say that you do all of your work in Europe, different regions in Europe, but for some reason you have the need to have a public network access DMARC point from your network in United States. So maybe you have a new client there or something like that. You want to give them an ingress point and you need an egress point from the Microsoft networks, but you don't want to give them a VPN connection, for example, right? So we can use this style of connecting to keep across the ocean from Europe to United States on Microsoft fiber, then demarc somewhere in one of, say, US West or something, and demarc out of there to public internet at a provider there that's close to maybe your client in that area, for example. So
Yeah.
it's a really interesting choice, right? Because instead of having to maintain your own private MPLS network, I've stood up some MPLS connections across Canada from, coast to coast kind of an idea, and across the United States. And when I think about the cost of per mile, I don't want to think about having to cross an ocean. So there's a lot of benefit to not just cost, but staying on that 10 and 100 gig fiber backbone that Microsoft has built and maintains. And we don't, as a business, you wouldn't have to maintain that. You simply, it just goes across. You have your regular data egress like you normally do.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about the cost layer on this one yet. There may be something different that I haven't had a chance to read up on. So please take that one, with a grain of salt. But staying on the Microsoft backbone is really important because it's a trusted network. You already have your data in Azure, so therefore you are trusting Microsoft Azure as a network as well. So that's really important that you get to stay on trusted networks and demarc somewhere worldwide off of their backbone. What are you thinking about? I can see the wheels turning.
So the good thing about this is I use. So you are right in all of the things that you are saying. Although I have to add one thing is we did cover this on that same episode, and it was in preview, and now it's GA. But the
Yep.
good thing about this, I see this, and that's the way that I like this show is we come with different perspectives, but it's valid perspectives from the field. I have a different perspective of this or a different usage of this that I did use this week, for example, when I was designing, in this case, a landing zone for a global dispersed client that they have their main data center in US. Okay, although they are dispersed in Europe, in India, for example, and South Asia. So this what allows you is with more than 180 edge point of presence that basically are the center of internet on different regions, and one of the biggest one in North America is in Chicago, for example, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's
Um,
huge.
there is presence of Azure directly there. So if you are connected to one of those point of presence and you enter into the Azure world, into those point of presence, then you can leverage all of that. So for example, what we were changing is they have the entire mesh network, okay, built on top of Cisco, for example, and you can have on different. I'm just picking up Cisco because it did come to my mind. You have
So
like
it's
a,
a common
and it's a
platform for
common one,
networking,
right?
right?
They have a lot of these mesh and all of that on different regions, um, and they can use in this case the closest one, because if you have, first of all, if it's cheaper to have MPLS, even if you want MPLS with a good bandwidth from their location. For example, I'm going to pick Brazil, okay, to that point in presence in Brazil, okay, in South America, and then entering at Brazil, for example, or even let's not pick Brazil, let's pick the Australia. So if you want to MPLS to their data center over here, it's going to be huge, okay.
That's pretty, yeah. Australia to Chicago, I can't even
Not
imagine.
even Chicago, to even to the yeah, to Chicago, for example. Let's go on that path. Even if you're doing that, no one is mentally doing a MPLS from Chicago, from Australia to Chicago, okay? Because
So I'm going to put that challenge out there for our listeners. If you have successfully implemented a completely wrapped around the world MPLS network like that from Australia to anywhere in the Americas, please go in the comments and let us know, because we
exactly.
would like to offer
No,
some free counseling services.
and let us know what is the latency, because the problem here is the latency, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And how you get that past the
And
CFO for a cost is
how many
beyond
hops
me.
are you getting until you getting to the destination, right? So, and this is probably no one is taking care of, or not taking care, not thinking about this. Why is so important doing this? But for example, let's talk about that. An MPLS directly from Australia to Chicago is going to be very latency, or a very high latency, very with a lot of hops, and probably very costly. Okay, so it's, and the bandwidth that will be available, it's not great. Let's call it this way. Okay, so instead of doing that, what I like about all of this routing preference is the possibility of going from when you are, for example, in Australia, to a data center in this case Azure data center in Australia, so you get lower latency to get into that, right, into data center. You don't need to deploy any type of infrastructure there, right? You probably could have even a gateway or probably some networking, but you don't need any other else infrastructure. You don't need firewalls. You don't need anything on that point. If you want, yes, okay, there is no problem with that, but you don't need. And then you are entered, like you said, on the backbone. And the backbone, we're talking about very big, um, very big, huge internet pipes. Like last time I heard, it was on the terabytes per second. With lots of ginormous bandwidth, right? That is the backbone of Azure. And now you have the opportunity to be, like you said, on a closed network, connected, and you are getting out, in this case, from your site without paying anything more besides the egress traffic. But if you have, in this case, express route, for example, you don't even pay for that, right? And you're starting to create a mesh inside of Azure using their infrastructure. And that's the part that you don't need. Look at this, you don't need to, besides creating those routing preference, that is one time configuration. You don't need to manage devices, you don't need to manage networking, you don't need to manage all of those type of things to see, oh, what I'm going to do regarding availability. No, this is the very core service of Azure. And that's the part that I like about that, because now you are taking, first of all, the capex from the organization into the not subscription, oops, uh,
Yeah, you change it to operate
to operation, to the from
operational costs,
capex to
right?
opex, and
Yeah.
you are taking the load from the network team to just basically be able to configure other things, that the mesh that you have of VPNs and all of that. So
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
it's a good thing to have it, right?
It is, yeah. So, and we always have this conversation with all of our different clients, both on our own and when we get to work together. But it's a critical conversation because we're always talking about Azure native services. And
Yeah.
anytime that we can fall onto the Azure native service, we know that the performance is going to mesh better. It's going to perform at the benchmarks that are advertised
Yeah.
because Microsoft has been very good about that. And they take those benchmarks really seriously, right?
And it
So if
and
you,
it's not only that. I think this service is one of the few service that Microsoft gives you 100% of SLA.
well, this is the yeah, that's the thing, right? So they have
So
a very high SLA, and it's
very
like
high is 100% of SLA.
it's not going to get any better, right? Because like in those articles,
Yeah,
they've been working on building this as a mesh network. So there's
completely.
no single, and in many cases, no even 2 or 3 points of failure. There's multiple ingress and egress points, and they've got all of these POPs worldwide. It's a really, really cool thing, right? So
And we're
yeah,
talking
I'm really
about more
looking
than
forward to it.
165,000 miles of fiber.
I saw that in the article.
So
It's
it's
hard to imagine that, right?
yeah, exactly. I have only fiber from my computer to my switch over there, and I think that I'm wow. I have 10 gigabits, and I'm it's yeah. They have like terabytes, and I say yeah. Let's not let's move on to the next one, so I don't get depressed with my with my lack of terabytes per second of bandwidth at my house. Um,
So we have a bit of a theme twist coming up because we usually steer a little bit away from some certain topics such as development, right?
yes.
But we have some interrelated items here. So what do we have coming up for our next
So we have
topic?
this token life management is now in private preview. And this is related to a little bit of DevOps, and usually we don't cover that much, but because we have a very good agenda, we decided, and it's something that we like to talk about it, and it's something that we want to just mention on our show. And this is good because now with DevOps UI you can create, renew, and expire what's called personal tokens.
Yeah.
And this is the functionality that I like because I did use this in private preview another day when I was talking with my developer in this case, and they want to access, and I was able to create this. It was in preview, yes, but it was able to create for them to test it. So it's pretty
Mhm.
cool, this part.
Yeah, and I really liked one of the reasons that my vote was to also keep it in was because it's really going to be an integrated part with the Azure pipelines, right?
Yeah,
And the whole, I mean, everybody coins the 3 and 4 letter acronyms, but that continuous improvement and continuous deployment is really important because the more we see things changing rapidly, we need to make these many minor adjustments to our systems in code, infrastructure as code, all these things working together. But if we make a bunch of minor adjustments, then we don't have to do a full rebuild, right? We get used to that cycle. And it's important to
absolutely.
introduce our organizations to that minor change cycle so that we can help move them forwards with that as well.
Yeah.
So that's my 2 cents on that one.
No, absolutely. You are absolutely right. And this is applicable not to the entire DevOps UI, but for example, for the Azure artifacts and Azure pipelines, you are obtaining this. And the part that I like about this, and I have to confess, I was this week on the MVP, what's called the internal call with the product group, and they were showing some of the new features that are coming regarding Azure DevOps. And the part interesting is there is that saying or proverb saying, "Eat your own dog food," right? and they are doing sprints on Azure DevOps to develop Azure DevOps. So
I think that's an interesting thing, right?
it
Because it
is it
also
is an
shows how
interesting thing.
powerful the platform is, right?
Yeah, and it's funny because it sounds redundant, but they are using their own platform to get better that platform that they are using. So it's kind of confusing saying, but it's literally seeing that okay, they make and they even said that the part that I like. They say yes, we were not very good onto this, but we are trying to get better, and that is the humble part of it that I like on these big organizations
Yeah,
because
it is one thing that I find in the Microsoft community, right? Company, like corporate side included,
yeah,
is they really do embrace change. And, you and I talk about this often, kind of outside of podcasting, but it's okay to make mistakes because it shows that you're stretching your limits and you're trying to learn and taking on new things.
yeah,
And it's interesting because I've been encountering that with some, what's the word I'm looking for here, peers recently as well. That it's okay to extend. I mean, as you know, I make a lot of mistakes. The difference, I think, between a seasoned IT professional and a beginner is that you have to know just when to admit that you made that mistake. And that if you have to ask for help, you say, hey, Marcos, can you give me a hand with this? I kind of messed this one up. I
absolutely,
think I need your fresh eyes on this thing.
absolutely.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
There is
It's
nothing
part
wrong.
of being human. It's part of evolving and getting better. So
Exactly.
yeah, don't be afraid to make mistakes and do new things. It's cool. It's fine.
It's cool. It's fun, and that's why I like to experience new things, and that's a very good segue. It could not be the best segue for the next 3-in-1. Let's go this way. 3-in-1 updates. So Azure AD Insights. It's not my wheelhouse, I have to say. Although I did work on some of those projects especially on Hadoop and on Apache Kafka, on some doing all of this. And now it's good to see that New Brazil Southwest region are added this service, the Azure AD Insights. Okay, so that means that the open source frameworks like Hadoop, Apache Spark, Apache Live, LLAP that I don't know what it is. I apologize. Apache Kafka and Apache Storm will be available on Brazil Southeast in this case. And that's a very good thing. It's now available on that region in
Yeah.
Brazil.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm in the same boat. There's some open source development stuff in there that I recognize. And I know I have actually my big brother used to work with R, doing a lot of financial analysis at big data scale.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of interesting things. So we've been seeing Brazil really expanding
Yeah.
what they have available. Also, not so long ago, they announced another data center region extending in Brazil as well.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
want to say it was like 3 weeks ago or something. It does
Absolutely.
blend together anything around Ignite, so I have to apologize.
No, it doesn't. But it's not the only region. So
That's right.
Norway, the other region is Norway East region is added to HD Insight as well. That's why
Yep.
we are saying that is that. I have to confess that I did work last time. Last time I worked with one of those tools was Apache Kafka. It's basically a streamline, let's call it data or streamline database. It's not a database, but a streamline that you can use very close with other tools, and it's really powerful the way that they are working on that. It's really cool, I have to say, especially for ETL type of workloads.
Mhm.
The ETL that you need to transform some of that data, it's really, really good, that part. But it's not the only thing. So Apache Kafka is one of the Azure Insight is one of the topics of this week.
That's right. But
As
wait, there's more.
there is more. Yes, there is more. There is another general availability of Australia Central 2, although it's not HD Insight, but it's Application
Application
Insight.
Insight. Yeah.
So this tool, I've been working lately with this tool, Application Insight, and is fabulous, I have to say. Okay, I have to take my hat off of this. It's really, really cool. The way that, and it's really simple, the way that you enable this on a VM, okay, and it collects that telemetry, collects that information, and puts that on a visualization that you can see what is connected, how is connected, and to who is connected is brilliant. I have to say that is brilliant. So now you know what is consuming. And the best thing of that is attaching to this with Azure Monitor with the good alerting monitoring, you can do marvelous with this service.
Yeah, yeah, you can really dig very deep. And once it's integrated with Azure Monitor, of course, now we have the added flexibility of some automation, alerting, ticketing. And my favorite piece in the automation for fixing things has long been that we have to build those kinds of monitoring tools, sorry, to be able to fix the problem, not just tell us about it. And Azure Monitor has come a really long way in the last, I want to say, a couple of changes that they've had to allow us to build those automations out much more easier. So it's less codey and more graphical now is kind of the way things have been going, codeless.
And deeper and deep analysis with easier, like to be able to monitoring almost the same way the Windows and the Linux. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's very deep and it's very detailed as well. So
Exactly.
if if somebody is working with an application that I mean, it's almost like it says you need insight into the application at a deep layer. This is a really cool tool to explore, and I think we both would encourage everyone to go and do that and test it out in your dev test environment.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Now going to moving to the most like the second topic, and again, it's a kind of a couple of updates um, with our good friend Azure Functions. I have to say that I've been working on this for a quite few time now to implement some of my automation that I want to bring. In this case, I've been working with Azure Function. Basically, one of the reasons because of you as well. We are using Azure Functions on this show, as we already comment. That is brilliant, made by you in this case, and it makes me look at this on the perspective or different perspective eyes. Like I have a very good friend of mine. It's not the same topic, but that he did, and it's not only him. I've been talking with different organizations and different friends and different colleagues that how they are using Azure DevOps, for example, and it just blows my mind how they're using. Last time I was it, I had a very good friend of mine that is doing some kind of work for his master or PhD or whatever was it, that he used Azure DevOps to create his thesis. So he uses the Azure boards, for example. It's not
I
related
was
to
going to
this.
talk about that, right? Because I was going to say, so, you and I both as kind of problem solving oriented thinkers, right? So,
Mhm.
technical people have this sometimes this weird polarizing thing where we see problems, we analyze them, and we get a bit rigid with it, right? And we're not always good at updating tasks and things like that. I'm sure you and I both have a long stream of project managers behind us that are all in counseling now. We're very sorry. But Azure Boards is really freaking cool, right? Because it literally presents, like the way that it presents the data, the tasks, in sprints and in as tasks to complete, and you simply drag and drop them. You can add the number of hours you've spent. It makes it easy. So I do want to kind of plug Azure Boards within DevOps a bit, because I think it's worth exploring for
Yeah,
business units, I want to say. Business
absolutely.
units that have lots of people on different diverse projects. There's some really good use cases in there. And if you need
Absolutely.
help with it, just let us know in
Just
the
let us know.
comments or on Twitter or something. We'll be happy to share whatever we know with you for sure.
Absolutely. But in this case, we didn't talk about this update. We talk
As
about
usual,
Azure
we got a
Functions,
little
and it's
puffed
related
up.
to Azure Functions. But now we have Node.js 14 in Azure Functions is now in GA. And that was the topic of this
It was,
update.
yeah. So yeah, Azure Functions, of course, very powerful. Node.js also very powerful, but used really, really widely by a lot of developers for different things.
Absolutely.
So we thought it was kind of cool that it's actually integrated now and generally available.
Yeah.
It's not in preview. It's a GA for Node.js 14 in Azure Functions. Really cool update.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not the only one. .NET 5 is on Azure Functions now supports is supported. Okay, it's become
Also in
GA,
GA too.
also in GA as well. So it's not only Node.js 14. Now the .NET 5, the last release, the last version of .NET is now available on Azure Functions as well. So we
Yeah, I'm
are
actually happy
starting
about
to
that one.
have more things that we can do it on Azure Functions to have, in this case, to be able to do it, and doing that, and it's really cool to introduce that now you can have .NET function apps on a separate worker process in these outside of the Azure Functions, and that's the part
Exactly. Well,
that is
yeah,
really
it's
cool.
going to allow us to use Azure Functions to power actual application properly, like apps that are properly tiered, right?
Yeah,
So we can have a front end, we can have a middleware layer, and we can have a data or back end layer.
exactly.
So it's going to allow us to tier things, which means that it's more scalable, that we take advantage of the built-in containerization, and we get a much more granular control on those processes. So
Absolutely.
I apologize, my developers showing a little bit on that one. It is actually a really cool update because it's going to allow .NET 5 to be properly used within the scope of Azure Functions.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of cool. Yeah, I do
Yes.
think we get a good update for these things now. You just
Yeah.
wait a couple more weeks.
Exactly. But it's not the only one. So now you
There's
have Python durable functions supported on in Azure Functions. It's now become GA as well. So again, it's a kind of Azure HD Insight and Azure Functions week, apparently, because right now Azure Functions have a lot of updates becoming GA, and this is a nice one. So now you can have those durable functions written on Python. I have to say that on my when I have free time, I'm learning Python because it seems to be a very nice scripting language in this
Mhm.
case that I want to try to develop a little bit more. And I have to thank to my wife when she's doing her degree in this case in computer science that she's learning Python and she's pushing me to the Python world as well. So we are studying together. Let's go this way, and I've been working on that, and it's. I'm happy to see this. That's why I bring over here on this on the show, right?
It is, yeah. And I remember, I'm going to say early 2000s, there was a rumor Python was a language of the past, but I've been in touch, I would say, with different development um, functions and cases over the years. And I feel very strongly that about 10 years ago, Python really started to make a good, powerful comeback in the developer community. It never went away because it was always in the back end powering a lot of other applications that needed the flexibility of Python. So it's really cool how Microsoft is integrating this. And I think it's a big commitment to the whole Linux platform open source as well, because there's a lot of Python integration within Linux as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And moving a little bit of subjects, talking about Azure Storage, but related to the first update with the routing preference. And now we can start to see why is that a good update and why we start that week with that. Is because now we can see that using the routing preference that becomes GA, we can leverage that on Azure Storage. So we don't need to traffic again. Using the same example of going from Australia to North America, you don't need to traffic with all of that during that time, and now you can leverage this to coming. And I did pull some of those internet egress pricing, and it's fairly cheap. So the first of all, the first intercontinental, and the part is this, to up to 5 gigs per month, it's free, right? And then you can have, depending how much data are you talking about, okay, the intercontinental data transfer, so means that from North America to the other continents, it's 0.05 per gig. Okay.
Yep.
So really cheap. In this case, if you are doing the internet egress routed by Microsoft Premium, depending how much it is, right, you can have that by the other ones. Comparing with egress traffic by transit ISP networks, it's even lower depending
Yep.
how much you are trafficking. So
Exactly.
it's really cool to see that you don't even need to come to Azure, or even if to build all of that. The between ISPs, right, that they are connected to Azure, between Azure and between all of that global network that Azure have, in this case, you are able to very low cost of transferring that. And those costs is going away if you have express route.
Bingo.
Just one express route for that, okay? And all of that costs going away, and now you have these massively, like 165,000 miles of fiber, more than 180 points of presence globally. It's like you enter. It reminds me that movie of Skynet. Remember that?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Every single geek guy saw that at least 3 or 4 times, and it reminds me that the Skynet, it's there.
Well, I was just thinking, with all that fiber, Microsoft is doing a good job of lighting up the world, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, completely. I cannot say other thing besides that. It's like they are they are doing that without any problems at all. Yeah. Lastly but not the least, yes, you're guessing this is a very short. Not a very short.
I was thinking, I don't think we've hit 2 hours yet, have we already?
We are almost reaching 3. Yeah,
I
know.
IT 15 minutes is what I meant to say.
No, exactly. 5 minutes. 5 minutes, I have to say.
But we'll have that fixed in 5 minutes.
But the good thing is, it's not only, so we all criticize Microsoft for that time, but it's not only Microsoft. So today I update my Mac, and it stays for 25 minutes, says 10 minutes. I
think it's easy to criticize those time estimates, right?
Yeah, it is.
But there's so many variables on every endpoint. It's really tough to actually have a good way to do that. So,
exactly.
Yeah, I would. Anyways,
but let's jump into this. Last but not least, GA of Azure Log Analytics in Australia Central 2. So We already talked about Azure Monitor. It's really interligated in this case, or interconnected to Azure Log Analytics. Is where, for example, Azure Sentinel relies on. Okay, one of
Exactly.
our
Log
favorite
analytics
products
workspace. Yeah.
at this part, and it's basically where you can have all of those logs connected. So
Now,
now,
and I just want to say on log analytics,
yeah,
I can't speak for every region because I don't work in every Azure region. There's just too many. But I know in Canada and US, log analytics storage is surprisingly lower cost than what I initially thought last year before I started working with it all the time.
yeah,
And I think that it's important to note because unless we get in and go hands on and play with things in like a testing environment, for example, that's where we can learn what the cost is going to be. So we have to do those measured tests, and we store like 1 gig a day of logs or whatever, and then you can extrapolate your cost out for what it may be in production based on the data, right?
absolutely.
So it's nice to know what the per gigabyte charge is for storage, but how much do you actually generate from logging in day-to-day activity in certain business segments? That's the part that might be a little bit foggy, especially when I think about like security events for Azure Sentinel. So
And
I just wanted to say that we
it's
have to
not
play
only
with the
that.
technology.
It's like the way that login lists have been working so far, and you know that you are working for a long time, right? Um, we only had one tier of storage, right? So if you have like all of that data that is coming, for example, and you only want the last 30 days, that usually is what you're monitoring, right? The most of it. The other one can go on the historical, let's call it, or archive kind of
The
tier,
archive or the cold tier. Yeah,
the cold tier. Right now you have that, but a few months ago or a few releases back, we didn't have that part. So it was fairly
exactly.
costive.
Yeah,
That part
it's been evolving and improving so
completely,
quickly. It's really
completely,
cool.
completely. And that's a good thing, because now in Australia Central too, they will have that possibility of having that. Um, we come around to our podcast, our show. So once again, thank you to you that you are listening. Yes, it's a very short one. You don't need to drive a long time to just listen to us. We make it simple this week. I think it's a very good week regarding what we had last time. At least we cover a little bit more deep all of those topics. But I want to thank you. Please don't forget to subscribe to help us out. You've been tremendous. We are so humble to see the tremendous helping and feedback from you guys. Please keep it up. And thank you, Andrew, one more time for being here. This time we did record on our daylight. We didn't place too many jokes. Incredible,
Yeah,
right?
well, everything worked out. We didn't have the technical glitches that we usually both of us have to kind
Oh
of
my
work
God!
through.
Last week was your ad was all over the
It,
place. I have to say.
I was on a trip a couple of times moving around a bit, but that's okay. I
Yes,
fidget enough for both of us, so that's all right.
absolutely.
Nonetheless, without dragging this out for our wonderful and beautiful listeners, thank you so much for joining us. And Marcos, thank you for having me again. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. So I hope I can see you next week. And thank you once again. Bye.